He is a world-class rugby player, and on a Saturday morning he is on his knees picking up plastic on the Strand shore. That contrast is the single image that changed how a lot of people think about him. This is a story about the small public acts that say who a person really is. Damien grew up in Strand, a coastal town in the Western Cape where every street carries its share of good humor and hard choices. Childhood there meant sandy lots, tightly packed houses in a community that had to be inventive to get by. For a boy with a ball at his feet, the local fields were more than play spaces. They were the place to learn how to move, how to think, and how to stay steady when opportunities were few. He didn't arrive at elite rugby the usual way of comfort and polish. He arrived through determination, work, and a steady refusal to let the obvious limits define him. A scholarship took him from Strand to one of South Africa's best rugby schools, and suddenly the world of elite coaching, green fields, and strict expectations was within reach. That scholarship changed his path, and he treated it like a second chance.
What many viewers don't expect is how much of his public life has been tied to nature and to place. He teamed up with reforestation groups and local partners to plant trees and run beach cleanups around Strand, projects that grew from personal memories, seeing more green after leaving home and wanting that same life for his town. Those actions are not press material, they're deliberate and quiet work to change a neighborhood.
On the field, his path was fast. He was playing senior rugby while most teenagers were finishing school. He made his professional debut as an 18-year-old, stepped into Currie Cup success, and soon afterward found himself part of the national conversation, earning a place in the Springbok setup and eventually in 2 World Cup squads that lifted the big prize for South Africa. Those milestones came early and they came with public scrutiny. This is not a tale of overnight change. It is the slow addition of small decisions, showing up to training before anyone else, studying game tape, helping his mother run a food initiative in Strand, and using sponsorship and public platforms for environmental projects. A headline might say star player, but the deeper story is about accountability, the choice to bring opportunity back home instead of walking away. Critics have had their say. Some questioned whether a player who can cover several positions on the backline would ever become a settled specialist star. Others mocked his calm, saying unpredictability sometimes looked like inconsistency. Yet what the critics missed was that versatility can be power when a player commits to learning every role, when he studies opponents and accepts responsibility for the team's shape. The conversation around his role shifted from what position to what does the team need now, and he answered that question in ways that made people take notice. Through it all, the image of the player collecting trash on the Strand shore became shorthand for a different kind of leadership. Not loud statements or staged events, but marching with your community and using your time, influence, and earnings to improve the place that made you. Later chapters would test him more, but first, the town had its own quiet claim on his story, and the town's story would be part of his public purpose. When Damien arrived at Paul Roos Gymnasium in Stellenbosch, it felt to him like another country. Green fields, strict routines, and an expectation that rugby players were not only athletic but disciplined. He learned positional play, how to read defensive lines, and how to manage the small details that separate good players from great ones. For a kid from Strand, the contrast was immediate, and it pushed him to learn faster. At school, he stood out for one simple reason: his awareness. He saw space and made choices the way a good chess player sees. 3 moves ahead. Teachers and coaches noticed a consistent curiosity. He would ask for extra film time, test new kicking techniques, and take feedback without drama. That hunger for detail became his advantage when the professional doors opened early. Barely out of school, he was invited into senior rugby environments. At 18, he made his Super Rugby debut, and then played a role in a Currie Cup winning side. Those early senior experiences hardened him. He learned the demands of pro training, the travel, and the daily attention to recovery. He also learned a truth: every professional player must accept public expectation grows faster than control over it. By 2019, he had made the Springbok squad as an injury replacement, a moment that meant he was now part of world-level preparations and a global rugby conversation. He took the chance to learn from established internationals, to watch how veterans carried themselves in tournament camps and how small habits add up.
That exposure was a practical course in professional life more valuable than any classroom. Not everything came easy. Critics on social channels and in comment pieces debated his best position: fly half, fullback, or inside center. Some argued that being able to do many jobs on the field might prevent him from mastering one. He answered that by getting better at the skill set for each role, by not hiding from challenge, and by making himself available as a tactical tool for coaches. Over time, the critics' chatter thinned, replaced by a more serious conversation about how to use a multi-skilled player to win important games.
Off the pitch, he kept showing up for shared causes. His mother ran a feeding scheme in Strand, and according to local reporting, he supported that effort rather than letting a charity check be the only contribution. He was visible in community work, not as a one-off appearance, but as an ongoing backing of local efforts, planting trees, clearing litter, helping with food distribution. Those choices matter because they speak to long-term investment in a place, not a short-term headline. There were lessons in criticism and public impatience in the false urgency of social commentary. He learned to ignore the noise by controlling the controllables: sleep, study, training intensity, and the small off-field rituals that create steadiness. He also learned language, how to speak plainly to the local media, and when to let performances on the field answer the questions. So when the world began to describe him in bigger terms, as a World Cup squad member, as part of a team that collected major trophies, it was easy to imagine it was overnight. The truth was different. A string of quiet choices, an acceptance of discomfort, and repeated returns to the same neighborhood that made him. That, more than anything, is how the public work and the game work started to line up. Local pieces have noted that the family effort feeds neighbors and that the player has been a steady supporter rather than a showpiece donor. Those stories make the public work personal. It's not just a star writing a check to help a faceless cause. It is family, home, and a daily reality. Away from the beaches and community drives, he has been building a life beyond rugby, studying for a commerce qualification, juggling assignments and exams between camps and matches. Back in town, the language shifts. How's it brewed becomes part of the narrative, as people describe seeing him at morning cleanups or popping in to help distribute meals. He knows names, greets shopkeepers, and refuses the kind of distance that often arrives with success. That proximity, being present enough that your community sees you showing the same small courtesies, creates a bond that lasts. And yet the sporting side was never far away. Coaches and teammates talk about his intelligence on the field, his ability to read a breakdown and to make the right call when confusion threatens to take the match's momentum. Those are the moments where the public might see spectacle. What they often miss is the rehearsal, the extra session on the kicking tee, the hours with performance staff, and the conversations about what the team actually needs. He became a player coaches could trust to cover difficult problems and to adjust when plans changed. When the Springboks needed composure and creativity, he offered both. In a period when the national side sought to rebuild and refine, his multi-role skill set was less a liability and more an asset. He could slot in where needed and still offer moments of ingenuity. Observers who had once doubted whether being multi-skilled would hold him back gradually revised their take as he shouldered responsibility in big squads and in important campaigns. There was a particularly heavy moment when the team traveled to New Zealand for a test that later became the subject of headlines for how it altered the historical ledger between the two nations. For him, the trip was more than a single game. It was a reminder that personal goals and national identity intersect, and that responsibility to team and town can coexist. People like neat endings, but real stories are messy. He's had off days, selections that didn't go his way, and rounds of public critique. He has also had public praise and the kind of trophies players dream about. The point of this chapter isn't to eliminate the tension, it's to show the route he chose when tension came. He put his energy into consistent work, into community projects, into learning, and into being available. In other words, he traded easy headlines for steady outcomes. He also chose to stay local when other offers arrived, a decision that sent a clear message: his bond with the Cape Rugby environment mattered. Staying allowed him to invest directly in local programs, and to be a visible part of the talent pipeline from Strand to Stellenbosch and beyond. When younger players see a pathway that keeps community at its center, they view professional sport as a tool they can use to build something for home as well as themselves. He built routines that mirrored his values. Training, recovery, and study were scheduled around outreach projects, so the work did not become an afterthought. He'd start with training, run a youth clinic, and sign a few autographs.
Later, he'd log into a class or library to finish an assignment for his commerce studies. It reads like a heavy schedule because it is, and that is the point. He did the heavy, persistent work rather than waiting for inspirational moments to do the heavy lifting for him. Those who have coached him say the same thing. He repeats effort until it becomes a habit. He is competitive, yes, but what stands out to teammates is how methodical he is about preparation. There's a modest side to it too. For the young players in Strand, perhaps the most meaningful thing is this. He left a way in. That pathway is not guaranteed, but the building blocks, improved facilities here, scholarship opportunity there, more local coaching started because someone who made it decided to invest in the next group. It's the kind of multiplier effect that community organizers and development workers talk about when they discuss sustainable impact. Media narratives love to reduce a person's life to a single moment or line, but his story resists simplification. The commitment to leave a better place, whether that means seedlings, meals, or mentorship, is messy, long, and often invisible. Yet over time it shifts what is possible. Kids who used to think of high-level sport as a distant dream now have real proximate examples and a small set of practical steps they can attempt to follow. So now, how do you finish such a story? You don't. You keep watching. He is still playing at a high level. He is still studying. He is still in town when he can be. Sleeves rolled up, talking to young players, getting sand between his toes, and helping pick up the pieces the tide has left. That's the part of the story that does not sit comfortably in game recaps or in the match-by-match broadcast. It's the slow work that behind the scenes changes the odds for a place like Strand. If you want a tidy line, say this. He became more than a player. He became a public actor who used his platform in daily ways and who let his community be part of the journey. The question for the next chapter isn't whether he'll win more medals, it's how he will turn those medals into longer-term change back home.